Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
Well, that I'm not going to be good enough, that whatever I do isn't going to matter. It's not going to be the right thing. It's going to be wrong. I'm going to be disappointed. Something along those lines.
Hey, what's up? This is Kirsten Carter, and you've tuned into the I Have ADHD podcast. I am medicated, I am caffeinated, I am regulated, and I am very much ready to roll. Today, in our Eagles gear, my client, Steev, and I are going to be talking about procrastination. This is something that plagues us with ADHD. Procrastination is something that we struggle with probably daily, maybe more like hourly. And those of us with ADHD need to figure out how to recognize procrastination, how to overcome procrastination. If we want to get anything done, we have to know about procrastination and how to overcome it. So that's where we're going today. But before we get there, I'm going to ask you to like, subscribe, and comment down below, because apparently I'm a YouTuber now, and that's what YouTubers have to do. So if you enjoy the show, if you find this valuable, if there is a measure of goodness in what you are hearing, I would so appreciate you taking a second to hit that rating button, like, subscribe, comment down below, as the YouTubers say. I would so appreciate it, because that's how the show is going to grow. That's how more people with ADHD are going to hear the content and be able to have access to just the good, grounded tools that we're giving. And so I really appreciate it. Anytime you take a minute to do that, it really means a lot to me and to the show and to other ADHDers out there. So thank you so much. So, Steev, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you. You told me in advance that you were going to be wearing your Eagles jacket. So I prepared. I have my little cute Kelly Green Eagles hat on. And let's just celebrate the Philadelphia Eagles.
I love it. I love the hat. I love the old school logo. That's where I'm wearing my old school jacket here. There's a story about that, and I'll relate it to procrastination here in a second.
Oh, it's so good.
But first of all, thanks. By the way, thank you for having me back. This is my second time here on the program, as my dad would say. And, if anyone wants to go back to the archives, last August 2023, you can hear a much timid version of me here.
A very timid Steev.
And here I am, and I'm much more comfortable. So thanks for having me back.
Oh, that's so cool. Thanks for being here. It's been really fun to watch your progress over the last couple of years. And the reason why you were on the podcast in 2023 was because you had gone through my coach training program.
That is correct, yes.
And if you remember your interview video, what was it called? Your submission video for the coach training program. You said why you wanted to be in the program, and you told me about yourself. And then you said, please tell Kirsten that I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I think that will give me a better chance of getting into the program. And I was like, sold, you're in.
That is right on. I had been a fan of the I Have ADHD podcast for a few years, and I heard you mention it. I think it was on an interview you had with Ari Tuckman.
Okay.
A couple years ago. It was pre-Super Bowl.
Yes.
And so this was...
You heard me mention the Eagles.
Yeah, just mentioned the Eagles, and I'm like, oh, wow, is she from the Philadelphia area? And then I realized that you're from... just outside.
Just outside. I can't say I'm from Philly, because Philly people will get very angry, right? You have to say you're just outside of Philadelphia.
So I wanted to use whatever I could to get accepted to your program.
So good.
And I'm really glad I did.
Cool.
That is, and we can talk about my ADHD diagnosis here in a second, but if I look at sort of a line of demarcation of things in my life, that is one that I'm really glad that I applied for.
Yeah.
And I can tell how much I have grown in that role. And I'm just loving it. So I have to thank you for that.
So good. That's just so great. So tell us about your ADHD journey. When were you diagnosed? What was that like for you?
Yeah. So I always start off any of my coaching calls like this with an intro if I'm meeting a new client. So my apologies to them for redundancy here. However, despite my youthful appearance, I'm old. I got my ADHD diagnosis later in life.
Okay.
I'm in my 50s now. I was 48, I think, when I got my official diagnosis.
Okay.
But this is something that I've known I had my whole life. I can
Sure.
point back to things that happened in 1986 and be like, oh, okay, that's
That was
where I was in.
ADHD. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'll never forget the first time I started hearing about ADD
Yeah.
was probably in the early 90s. I remember having a conversation. I was a swim coach back then, doing some of that for a high school team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the students who had just graduated had said, yeah, I have this attention deficit disorder, and, I can read, the Philadelphia Inquirer, but I don't want to do my chemistry homework. And I'm like, well, I do that too. That doesn't mean that's
normal.
there's nothing that's not, I'm like, there's a mental health condition.
Right.
So as more and more, Driven to Distraction came out and other books came out. So it's something I always knew that I had. I just didn't know how connected it was to other things in my life.
Yeah.
So I get my official diagnosis in 2020. I'm thinking, the first thing that they do at the time, and hopefully it's getting better now, but very common, the first thing they did was, okay, here's your diagnosis and here's your prescription for Adderall.
Yeah.
We'll see you in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, great, this is going to solve
I'm cured.
all my problems.
Yeah.
And Kristen, I kid you not, I had the prescription for Adderall. They said, take it like 9 a.m. in the morning, whatever, before 9.
Sure.
So I'm sitting there the night before, I'm crying because I'm thinking this is going to solve all of my problems.
Oh,
like, wow. And I started taking it and I hated it.
Yeah.
It made my brain more foggy. I didn't
Yeah.
know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it was probably about a year later, I found a book magically in my Audible recommendations called ADHD 2.0
Yes.
by Dr. Ned Hallowell.
Yes.
And
let the choir of angels sing for Dr. Ned Hallowell.
Absolutely. And, as I'm reading that book, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is me. This is me. This is me. He's talking about me. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, then I learned there's more to like what's going on up here than not being able to pay attention to a boring sales presentation.
Sure.
I worked in sales. Boring sales presentation or a lecture, in high school or college.
Mm-hmm.
And, at that time, Dr. Hallowell had a podcast. And on that podcast, now he doesn't remember this, but on that podcast, he had none other than Kristen Carter. And so...
Wait, stop. It's so funny that you say that he doesn't remember. You want to tell them why?
Yes. So I'm sorry. So a little inside baseball for everyone here.
So good.
We're getting together this weekend in Philadelphia. That's the Eagles jacket, Eagles hat for Kristen.
Yes.
For what's called VIP Day for members of the FOCUSED program.
Yep.
Last year, Kristen did an inaugural VIP Day.
Virtual.
Virtual.
Yep.
Everything was on Zoom. It was
Yep.
great. This year, there's still a lot of people on Zoom, but about 50 or 60 of us are going to be here in person, which is fantastic.
So fun.
So Dr. Hallowell was the guest speaker.
Indeed.
And, here's Dr. Hallowell comes on. And now, again, they always say
Our rock star.
Yeah, they always say never meet your idols. So here he comes on and it's like
true.
this, he's like upset because he didn't know he was on the wrong Zoom. Someone didn't give him the right thing, just kind of a little bit curmudgeonly. And the first question you asked him, and this is amazing. The first question you asked him is, do you remember me? And he said, who are you?
Yes.
And the funny thing is that I call it a home and home. You were on his podcast. He was on yours.
Totally.
And Dr. Hallowell, he couldn't remember it. And I think that's his ADHD.
Yes, agreed. We had a lot of compassion for him. It was
absolutely.
no biggie.
And you handled it. Folks watching this, if you wanted a lesson in composure, Kristen handled it amazingly.
He wasn't super happy. And then he was like, who are you? How do I know you? And I was like, oh, we just talked a couple months ago, but it's all good. It's all good. It's so funny. Okay, I'm so sorry.
No.
ADHD 2.0, you heard me on his podcast.
Yeah, so I'm like, I got to join this focus thing because that's one of the parts in the book. They talk about community. And I think, okay, if I can get in touch with other people like me, this is great. And so I started listening to your podcast and then this is coming out. I'm coming up on 3 years now in Focus. So
wow, Steev. That's cool.
yeah, it's amazing. So like
Cool.
I said, it's a line of demarcation. I got the diagnosis. I can look at the book. And then really it's when I did Focused,
Yeah.
I decided being in that, and I'm coming off of a career in sales. I work for tech companies. I've had that, been in that space since the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like a lot of ADHDers, I would get a job, do great, 2 years, get that like 2 to 3 year itch. And, you know, something would happen. Either I'd leave, they'd leave, whatever, who knows? But, and it's also a different time in the software industry too. That's kind of normal to churn through. But once I saw that, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to help people like myself who it took a little while to get here.
Yeah.
Now we're here. What can we do better? And Focus was a great place for it.
Yeah.
The coach training program was amazing. So thank you.
That's so good. I'm so glad that you felt it was valuable, because your class was just such a joy to teach. So yeah, it's a special group of people.
No, it was wonderful.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
so that was sort of my entry into ADHD and this community.
So did you ever find a medication that felt good to you?
Yes. So medications, I learned medication was tricky. I also, the other key point, and to share this if anyone else is dealing with this as well, find the right psychiatrist who can work with you.
So good.
So many people just want to kind of, again, churn through. They're overworked. They don't. So give yourself a little bit of grace and patience, not just with the psychiatrist, but just in general with everything. I try to remind my clients to give 8 hugs to themselves a day.
Oh, it's so good.
But just have that grace, because, you know, if you don't find the right psychiatrist, it's okay. Keep working through. So I actually had to go through about 3.
Okay.
So I found the right psychiatrist. We kind of messed around a little bit with the Adderall prescription for a couple years. And now Vyvanse has gone generic, and that's what I'm on. And I think that's the best.
Like, for everyone listening, it's so important that medication makes you feel good. If it doesn't make you feel good, then don't take it, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so you taking the Adderall and being like, this feels terrible, like that is the perfect indication that it is not right for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, once I learned that, okay, medication's tricky. There's that adage. It's like some dose works for some people some of the time. So you just have to be patient with it.
Yeah. And there's a handful of people, I think the statistic is 10% of people who never find a medication that feels good for them. And then there are other things, right? So what are the other things that you use to treat your ADHD? So medication, what else?
Exercise. I try to do 30 minutes of exercise every day.
Great.
Mindfulness, the meditation. I start my day every morning with just even a 7-minute mindfulness meditation. With an app. There's many of them out there.
Yeah.
Community is a big thing. Talking to other people.
Yes.
I mean, I've had hundreds of conversations with people, and even
with ADHDers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just making that connection, like, okay, yeah, that's how I feel. And now that I'm on the other side of coaching, I see that. I see it from a different lens.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have ADHD. It's just never going to go away.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's never going to go away. But it's that. There's also things that I've been trying as well, besides, you know, community, exercise, mindfulness, setting up an environment. I have a standing desk at home.
Nice.
Because I like to stand.
Yep.
I have a balance board that I use. I don't use it all day, but I stand on it. It's helpful.
Yeah.
I have, my desk is also a whiteboard. So
cool.
I'm an old school person. I write things down on notes. And so that helps me as well.
So good. So we're here to talk about procrastination today. And I'm wondering what it means to you. Like, when I say procrastination, what do you think about? What does that like mean to you?
Quite a few things. So I do have a funny procrastination story.
Give it to me.
And it's, so I think about 2 months ago on your Instagram stories, you had put up, hey, if there was one ADHD trait you would like to do away with, you know, what would it be?
Yeah.
And immediately, so there was, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but there was a famous song in the 80s called Infatuation. And so I'm gonna sing a little bit, but it's like infatuation. Woo! Sorry to offend Rod Stewart if he's
That's
out there.
amazing.
But so when you put that poll out there, I thought to myself immediately. I said, procrastination. Woo! And so yeah, for me, that's probably one of the biggest things that I
Yeah.
have. One of the biggest
Oh,
symptoms
wow.
that I deal with,
Yep.
and it's just that constant there. And
Mm.
at first, I think, and I can point to so many examples,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things now when it comes up. I know that it's sort of a trauma response.
Oh, tell me more. What do you mean by that?
Well, that I'm not going to be good enough. That whatever I
Mm.
do isn't going to matter. It's not going to
Yeah.
be the right thing. It's going
Yeah.
to be wrong. I'm going to be disappointed. Something along those lines.
Or someone else might be disappointed in me.
Someone might be disappointed in me. Someone might think less of me. They might
Yeah.
look at you and say, "Oh, that's what you thought,"
Yeah.
and like judge you in some way.
Mm.
So sometimes it's better to be left in those thoughts in your head rather than, at least
Yeah.
that's how I used to think. Now I
Sure.
don't think that way.
Wow. So, how do you, when you look back on your life, how do you see procrastination's impact? Like, what's the earliest memory that you have of procrastinating? Was it like childhood?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I could take you back to, I would remember school reports that would be due like the next day, and we
Yep.
needed to get contact paper to seal up
Oh,
like a
yes.
collage.
Sure.
And it would be 7 o'clock on Sunday night, and I would tell my parents. And I remember one time they're like, "Well, there's no place we can't go anywhere to get it."
Right.
So I'm like, "Okay." So I used Saran wrap, and I went to school the next day with everyone has their nice laminated notebooks or whatever we were working on,
Yes.
and mine's done in Saran wrap.
That's amazing. It's endearing and it's funny and I'm laughing, but what was the emotional experience for you as a kiddo?
Oh, just like
Was it shame
I
or?
was just, yeah. I think if I had to look back on it, it was that it was I didn't want to ask for.
Yeah.
I grew up in a not a huge family, but we had 5 kids. There were 5 of us. So, and I had 3 sisters, and so that they kind of took a lot of the attention from my parents.
Mhm.
So I was 4th out of 5. I was
Okay.
the second boy, and so it was hard for me to have that voice to ask for what I
Yes.
needed. That's what it was, to ask for what I needed. I
Wow.
just did not have the voice to do that.
Do you think that impacts us in a way that makes us procrastinate? Like the fear of asking for what we need?
I don't know if that's exactly, definitely it correlates for sure.
Sure.
I don't know if it's exactly that, and
Yeah.
if there's a few things
Yeah.
tied to that. But that it's definitely had an impact for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the ways, more recently that you've seen yourself procrastinate?
Yeah.
Like you are much more self-aware, you have an ADHD diagnosis, you're being treated, you're a coach, you're taking self-development seriously. So are you free of procrastination or does it still show up for you?
No, absolutely.
Tell me, give me the juicy stories.
Well, there's one on and I won't share into too much details, but I've been working on I was previously married. We had been working on a custody arrangement now for several years.
Yeah.
And I look back to one of the things that I'm like, gosh, if I just would have hired that lawyer maybe 2 weeks earlier. And of course, in our minds, it always works out. Like if I did that,
it would have been perfect.
it would have been, everything
Yeah.
would have worked out great. So
Yeah.
now I've come around to understanding that maybe this is just what would have happened anyhow.
That's good. Oh, there's so much peace in that, isn't there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think thinking the other way,
Yeah.
like if I did it this way, it
torture.
would have been, everything would have worked out.
Yeah.
And, we can't control that. We can only
Yeah.
control the now. And it took a
Good.
long time for me to get there.
Sure.
But that's something that I just always have to remind myself that, maybe this is just what it would have been.
Yeah.
No matter if I did hire someone 2 weeks before.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like our tendency to just always want to beat ourselves up and say, like, if you had just done XYZ, then
Absolutely.
it would have been perfect.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you started learning that procrastination was connected to ADHD, what was that a relief? How did that make you feel?
That's a good question. So with many symptoms tied with ADHD, I had this euphoric, there were 2 parts. I had this euphoric
Yeah.
feel, especially for procrastination,
Okay.
especially around that. But I had this euphoric, wow, I can control my brain as opposed to it controlling me now.
Yeah.
And then I also had the guilt and the shame, like, oh my gosh, I'm 48 years old and I'm not
Yes.
further along
Yes.
than
Or I'm
this.
just learning this now.
Yeah. So it's sort of that tricky thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that once I understood, and I give Dr. Hollow a lot of credit for that book, the ADHD 2.0, as well as Driven to Distraction.
Yeah.
Those books kind of understand and make you aware that, okay, all these other things that you thought, like anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
I have a sensory processing thing
Sure.
that I deal with, that they're actually all tied to what I'm dealing with my executive functioning through ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just like relieves us of a lot of, for me, I'll speak for myself. It relieves me of a lot of shame and blame and judgment when I can say, oh, that's here not because I'm a terrible person, but because I have a deficiency or because my brain works a certain way or because of my wiring, rather than like, oh, it's a character flaw or there's something wrong with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so funny because when I was decided to wear this jacket today, I thought of one of the things that a symptom, we'll move off of procrastination for a second, but impulsivity.
Yes.
So this jacket is made by a company called Mitchell and Ness, which is right here in Philadelphia. And they make nostalgic jerseys and things like that. And in my impulsive days, in the early 2000s, like late 90s, I would go there and would drop $300 on a jersey. And I have so many of them still at home. And I gave away a whole bunch, but I still have a box full of things like that. So
and there could be so much blame of like, why do I keep da da da? And then to be able to point to, oh, I know why.
Exactly. And it goes back to your point, like, I'm not a bad person. I used to think I was a bad person for that, for having that feeling. And now I know what it was. It was that dopamine that I would go into that store.
Look at that jacket. That is full of dopamine.
I would throw down the $300 and I would walk out with something like this. Now, this has a different story to it. And I'll relate this back to procrastination here in a second.
Sure. Oh, that's great.
But yeah, that's exactly right. I used to think I was a bad person. My dad used to say how he could save money, and I never spent money. I would save it, and I don't understand why you can't, and things like that.
Yep.
And but I understand now, and this also brings me back to medication. To know that, okay, there's that saying, skills or pills don't teach skills.
Absolutely.
But what to think about with the medication is that dopamine hit. I walk into a store.
Yeah.
I used to love to go to new shopping malls and like walk around and see new stores and see all this new stuff and new people. It was exciting.
Yeah.
But what the medication will do is it gives you that, gives you a little bit of that feeling. So now you don't have to chase that. And now you can, it's not going to do your work for you.
Yeah.
But it's going to help you. Now you don't have to necessarily chase that part of it. And so that's why it is very important, and it could be very helpful for folks.
I'm really glad that you said that, because that's not something that we talk about often. Like, medication helps in general, yes, but like when you get so specific to say, I used to impulse shop because I needed the dopamine hit, and now I don't, like, I shop and sure, there's dopamine there, but I don't impulsively do it or compulsively do it, right? There's not like that urgency for I need that
Yeah,
dopamine hit.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate to that so much.
Absolutely.
Woo!
Well, you're not far from King of Prussia. I mean, there's a million stores.
I pass it every time I come to this studio and I'm like, anthropology, I'll see you next time. Everyone with ADHD knows what to do to improve their lives. You go to bed at a reasonable time and you wake up early, make a list, cross the things off the list in order, manage your time well. Yeah, we know what to do, but ADHD is not a disorder of not knowing what to do. It's a disorder of knowing exactly what to do, but not being able to get yourself to do it. That's why ADHD is so frustrating. We're smart and we want to succeed, but we can't get ourselves to do the things that we know we should do in order to make improvements. That's why I created FOCUSED. I'm a life coach with multiple certifications, and since 2019, I've spent thousands of hours coaching adults with ADHD. Time for me to focus on you. Hello. Welcome to your coaching call. I am going to be coaching you today on relationships. I know what it takes to help an adult with ADHD go from hot mess express to grounded and thriving. FOCUSED is my monthly coaching membership where we go deep and we get to the root cause of what holds us back with ADHD. I'll teach you how to understand your ADHD brain, regulate your emotions, and accept yourself, flaws and all. With this foundation, we build the skills to improve life with ADHD. And not only do you get skills and tools in FOCUSED, but you're surrounded by a huge community of adults with ADHD who are also doing the work of self-development right alongside of you. Dr. Ned Hallowell says healing happens in community, and I have absolutely found this to be true. As a matter of fact, listen to what actual FOCUSED members have to say about being in this program.
What can I say about FOCUSED?
Full community of people who have issues similar to you, and no one judge you.
FOCUSED has really supported me with my difficulties and asking for help. I've been encouraged and cheered on by the community.
I really like that you can do as much or as little as you want. It's not just about the volume of the content, it's about the quality.
FOCUSED has helped me understand ADHD better.
I would recommend this to anyone.
I would thoroughly recommend FOCUSED.
I can confidently say that this is one of the best decisions that I have made for myself.
So if you're an adult with ADHD who wants to figure out how to be motivated from the inside out and make real lasting changes in your life, join hundreds of others from around the world in FOCUSED. Click the link in the episode description to check it out. I'm curious, Steev, and this is maybe a painful question to answer, I'm not sure, but what has procrastination cost you? What has been the cost of procrastinating? If you can share with us kind of maybe in general or more specifically, whichever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I joke that I should write my next book, and I'll talk about my current book, but my next book should be I Should Be Rich. Because I could talk about jobs, job opportunities missed, job opportunities lost that I was in, dream jobs that I had.
Dang.
That maybe I, procrastinated because I didn't want, again, didn't have that voice that was nourished when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I would also project bosses as like my parents. So when I would need to tell them like, hey, maybe it's a sales not coming through or a customer. And, I would just find any way I could to like procrastinate that decision till it's the last minute. And so, yeah, I could think about that with relationships and jobs. And, that's where you can really beat yourself up.
Yeah.
But the self-awareness part helps. And it's, it was not an easy journey to get here.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I had that capability to look back and say, well, we don't know what would have happened anyway.
Totally. And I think that as we mature and as we are doing self-development work, the self-awareness just gives us so much more understanding of why we made certain decisions. Like you even saying, and you just kind of breezed past it, but it was profound. I used to project onto my bosses my parents. And so then I
Absolutely.
couldn't go
Yeah.
to my bosses and say, hey, the sale that I've been working on is not going to be coming through, because I was projecting the relationship of my parent onto them. That's profound. That self-awareness is amazing.
Yeah, and I can think of that too in relationships where
Wow.
that has happened.
Yeah.
And I'm in a good place now with a very solid partner, but it didn't, there were
Wasn't
some
always that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely. So that's the sort of thing, like procrastinating, telling them, hey, we don't have the money for this. We don't have the money to go on this trip to Vail, Colorado, whatever it is.
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Man. What are some ways that you have worked to overcome procrastination? What does that look like?
A cheap publicity for you. So focused. First of all, if you're listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube and you have ADHD, if you're not a member of Focused, what are you waiting for? So come on in. You will be so happy you're here with us. You'll get to interact with people like myself, people like Kirsten, and there's 900 others in there. But hearing other stories, but also you did a course in, I want to say it was in March of this year of 2024. And you talked about it, and it was really where I, even one of my clients recommended, because I can't listen to all the courses.
Sure. Nobody does.
Nobody does.
Except for Nicole. I think she listened to every single one, but she's the only person.
But I look at Focused Focus is like an amusement park. You walk into, you're here in Pennsylvania, you go to Hershey Park, Dorney Park. We were a big Great Adventure family.
Yes, Great Adventure.
You go in there, you don't ride every ride, and you don't need to.
Yes, it's so good.
Just do what you can.
Yeah.
A client turned me on, and they said, hey, did you hear Kirsten's procrastination first one today? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And they mentioned one or two things, and I'm like, I got to listen to this. So on my ride home, I put it in the members podcast, and that's the sort of work that we do in Focused that you can do on your own. You do it on your own terms, and that can help. And then you can see like, okay, me procrastinating isn't because I'm a bad person. It's a trauma response. It's probably goes back to childhood for many of us.
Isn't that wild to connect it? Yeah, it's so interesting because we grow up thinking or hearing, let me say it this way. We grow up hearing, if you only applied yourself, you're so smart. If you just applied yourself, you would do so well. You could be successful. Or if you only saved money, or if you only studied harder, whatever. And so that becomes the voice in our head, right?
Absolutely.
And then we're facing a work email that we don't want to write, or we're facing a project that we need to turn in that's almost finished, but not quite, right? Or we're facing just a pile of laundry, like an infinite pile of laundry.
Or a pile of bills.
Yes.
A pile of mail that you don't want to open.
Oh, the pile of mail. That's so real. I just got a feeling, and not a good one. That pile of mail that's just sitting there that there's bills in there that need to be paid. You're just not. You're just like, meh, I'll get to it. But then the voice comes in where it's like, if you just worked harder, you could do it. If you were just a better person, you could do it. And it's realizing like, no, there's a reason why I procrastinate. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's not because I don't have my shit together. It's like, I am avoiding this because of it's really a feeling, don't you think? Like we're avoiding the emotion, or we're avoiding the fear.
And you're right. There's an emotion there.
Yeah.
And I hear from so many ADHD clients and even myself.
Yeah.
Once you do the thing, it's never as bad. It never takes as long as you think it's going to take. The reaction's never as bad as you think it's going to be on the other side. And that's okay. We have to learn, and it's baby steps.
Yeah. How do you think emotional regulation plays into procrastination?
Oh, hugely.
Huge.
If you're not, emotions are everything. Someone told me that once. But yeah, if you're not in a good space, any one of the symptoms that we have, if I'm overstimulated, if I'm whatever, like I might, I know that snapping at my daughter isn't going to work.
Yeah.
I know that, but it's still like if I'm overstimulated, I'm chasing them around my 4-year-old around an airport.
Yes.
And I tell her, hey, I told and she falls.
I told you to get over here.
And she falls, and I tell her, I know it's not going to matter, but still. But again, so that's where emotions, you have to tie it back, and it's not perfect. No one's going to get that perfectly. You have a great manner around that. So
around emotions, is that what you mean?
Absolutely.
Do you what was that like for you? Because I remember kind of walking through that process with you of identifying emotions and processing emotions. What was the experience like for you? I think you were probably nearly 50 at the time, interacting with your emotions, maybe for the first time, truly listening to your body.
Absolutely. Because I personally don't do well with emotions. And now I'm getting more and more, I'm getting way better at that.
Yeah.
And it's because they used to just sit right here like a piano on my chest.
Yeah.
And, now thinking back to, some of the tools that we have in our toolbox to help us with that.
Yeah.
It's great. But yes, specifically in the coach training program, one of the modalities that we use is the steer map method.
Yeah.
And I use that with my clients as well, and I love it. It's a great way to think intentionally.
Yeah.
But the E in that is emotions, and to know that emotions drive our actions. And, I'll never forget this. You did an evaluation of a Zoom call that I recorded for a client, and you said to me, and I just would brush past the emotions and onto actions. Okay, our emotions lead to actions, but I'm feeling sad. Okay, well, then what did you do? And not really letting the person breathe. And that was, we're both wearing our Eagles gear. Jalen Hurts always says, coach me, tell me what I need to do. Tell me, coach me, be hard on me. And I'll never forget, you said, hey, this is, if you just sit there in that emotion, I feel like that's where you're struggling, is you want to move on so quickly. And that really helped me understand that. And now once I see it in others, then I'm able to also even get a better grasp of it myself too.
Oh, I just love how you said that, because this is why we need each other. This is why humans need each other, right? It's I can't learn all of this on my own. I can't learn how to be a human on my own. We need other people to reflect things back to us. And you saying, when I see it in my clients, it helps me understand it in myself. That makes me misty. That's just so beautiful, because this is why we're always encouraging on this podcast, the listeners, to join a community, whether it's focused or any other community, where you can be mirrored and there can be that back and forth, and you can see yourself reflected in someone else and your emotions are reflected in someone else, because it provides such a deeper understanding. I'm just really glad you said that. I thought that was
absolutely. And, so again, I thank you so much for what I learned from you and for accepting me in your coach training program. So
first of all, you were very easy to accept, and you're extremely coachable. So it's hard as a human to give feedback to someone and say hey, you could sit there longer and you could do this differently, but you're all right, coach, tell me what to do. I'll do it. And I've seen such growth from that. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you, Kirsten.
My dear.
Yes.
How do you help your clients with procrastination? What are some things that you kind of walk them through as they're struggling with procrastination?
That's a good question. So again, it's that let's talk about it. Let's figure out where does this come from? Where have you been? Let's go back to, certain things. Again, every coaching call is different.
Yeah. That's why we like it, right?
Every coaching call is different. Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. It's the dopamine. That's what I get now. That's where I get it from.
Yes.
I guess. But every coaching call is different. Every client's different.
Yeah.
And so every call with a client is different. So it's a few things, but it's a lot of times it's hey, let's figure out the origin of this. And I don't necessarily know that that's going to change for you moving forward, but at least if we identify it, and then you can recognize in yourself where that comes from, and then you can decide, like, okay, do I want to put this off until next Thursday, or do I want to handle it now and just get it out of the way?
Yeah, I think that when we have the understanding of why we're procrastinating, it's so much easier to overcome, because our default is the reason why I'm procrastinating is because I'm a bad person and I don't do anything right and I just don't know how to do anything. Right. And so if we as coaches can help our clients to see, like, no, there's a really good reason why you're procrastinating. Maybe you're afraid to do the thing, or maybe it's not actually something you want to do. It's someone else's expectation of you that you just don't want to do. And so turns out let's just not do it because it's not even for you.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That's a real great point, because it's like the longer you put something off, then it's just not going to get done.
Yep.
But if you can identify that, okay, actually, I could hire someone to do this, or I could work with someone to do that, or I could ask for help.
Or my husband told me I should do it, but so I have this should in my head, and then I have this expectation in my head, and this fake deadline in my head, but it's not actually something I want to do. So I'll just hand it back to him and say, like,
absolutely,
babe, I don't actually even want to do this. So if you want it done, it's yours. Enjoy.
And also sometimes it comes to, like, what emotions come up. So one of the things, and the inspiration for me, so a couple things, if you don't mind me talking here for a second.
I love it. Go for it.
So for everyone kind of following along at home, I grew up here in Philadelphia, literally minutes from here, in a town called Havertown. Went to high school around here, grew up in this area, spent a lot of time right minutes from the studio in the borough of Manayunk here. I have not been home in about 2 years since the passing of my father. So one of the procrastination things around is tied to that.
Wow.
I recognize that with ADHD, a lot of it's hereditary. So I see it in my kids. And so I started doing some inventory, like, okay, who in the family could I have maybe gotten this from? And absolutely, I look at my dad, and I know right there where I got everything from. So one of the things I've been putting off is, for 2 years, I've been wrestling with this idea. I've even gone so far, wrestling with the idea of writing a book called On Eagle Wings. It's about what you think, but it's also not about what you think. What's tied to that is how I related to my dad, which was I had to learn a love of sport to have a conversation with him. And also, as I said earlier in this conversation we're having, I had 3 sisters. So that gave me like a leg up on my sisters if I knew sports. So I didn't have a choice. I just had to dive in. Does that mean that I wouldn't be a Philadelphia Eagles fan today? I live in the Bay Area now. I'm married to a 49ers fan. I will never convert. I will never convert to the San Francisco Giants, Golden State Warriors, none of those teams. My roots are here. But would I still be a fan? Probably, but maybe I wouldn't be hanging on, listening to sports talk radio and as into it as I have been over the years. And a lot of that comes from my dad. And I recognize with that was, okay, his ADHD, and he never had it treated. Wow. And one quick story on this where I got the idea for the book. And I've gone so far as I hired a book coach. I paid them the money, and I got like about, I don't know, I have all the chapters written. I have them titled. I have quotes tied to each chapter. There's 18 different chapters. I have a lot of it in the book coach's hands, but then I'm like, it's not good enough. And it's not, so I'm beating myself up over that. But where I got the idea for the book, and this ties into so much ADHD with this story.
I love it.
So in California, my parents, their birthday was coming up. This is in like 2015, 2016. In the Philadelphia area, there's a very famous sports columnist named Ray Dininger. And he wrote a play called Tommy and Me. And Tommy is the story of Tommy McDonald. And Tommy McDonald was a football player for the Philadelphia Eagles in the 50s and 60s. My dad was a big fan.
Yeah.
And so he wrote this play. And I thought, I heard an ad for it. I'm like, I'm going to get my parents tickets for that play for their birthday. So I bought them the tickets and sent them to them. I'm like, hey, I called them the next day, like, how was it? And my mom said, well, your father, and she hands the phone to my dad. And it was out in, the play was actually on Delaware Avenue. It was in Philadelphia here. And my dad, being my dad, was looking around for the best parking spot.
Oh my gosh.
So he was driving around, and this is the ADHD. You're in a task, you're stuck there, you're in that task. You got to find that parking spot.
Yep.
So he's driving up and down, and there was one maybe a block away, or one that was charging $15 or whatever the rate was.
Not too expensive. Let's keep going.
So he parked like 3 miles away, walked to the show. They missed half the show. So, and the timing of this was fortuitous. So my mom passes in 2021. My dad, at this point in 2022, it's April of 2022, he is in an assisted living facility. But I know it's like nearing the end, and he passed in September of 22. So I hear an ad. Again, I listen to podcasts for Philadelphia sports. I hear an ad. They're like, we're going to do Tommy and Me at the New Hope Theater this week. So I'm like, I tell my wife, I said, I'm buying tickets. I'm flying out there.
Aww.
And I'm going to take him to this play. And then
He's going to see the whole thing.
I'm going to drive him home. I'm going to drive him back. So I do this. I literally fly out. This is 2022. We're still kind of fresh off the pandemic.
Yeah.
Everyone's wearing masks everywhere.
Yeah.
You had to show your COVID vaccination card to get into the theater. So it was a little bit of a different time. So my wife said, really, I don't want to go for long.
Yeah.
We have at that time, she's a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
We're having some tough times with that.
Yeah.
So she's like, I can't have you gone for too long. So I'm like, no problem. I'm gonna catch the red eye out Friday night. I'll pick him up. We'll drive up to New Hope.
Yeah.
And go to the theater, and then I'll drop him off, and then I'll come back the next morning. And that's what I did. But so this is where the ADHD part comes in. And I recognize, again, the parking story being one of it. Now I can look back and like, how many times have I done that?
Yes.
But we're on the way. So I pick him up. We're on the way to New Hope. He's literally at the Pennsylvania Delaware line.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't get further from New Hope. It's like an hour and a half, basically. It's like the furthest parts of the Philadelphia area. So we're driving up there, and imagine let's say your son or daughter, when they're older, come back, they travel 3,000 miles to see you. On the car ride, you're probably going to talk to them and be like, hey, how are you? What's my dad doing? He till the very end of his life, he was organizing trips for his church every Monday to go to Atlantic City. So what's he doing this Saturday night?
Wait, to gamble?
It was a senior citizens trip.
Church gambling trip.
Yep. They would take,
amazing.
They would go down to Atlantic City, had the whole spiel. It's like, you pay $30, you get $25 back. We park at resorts or whichever one.
Oh, bless him.
And it's a great deal. I mean, he never really gambled. He liked to organize the trip. But he had
all he would talk about?
He had 55 seats to fill on the bus. And so literally we're driving up to New Hope, an hour and a half. He's on the phone, 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, making calls to people.
No.
Like, I got 5 more seats to fill. And so that's where I said, you know what? I need to relate this story back.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's other people that probably picked up something that they liked because of a loved one.
Yeah.
I've related this story to actually another FOCUSED member. And she said to me, wow, I can't believe that, because I think back to, I got into real estate because my dad was in real estate.
Wow.
So I think it's something that could relate to a lot of people.
For sure.
Relating, regardless of the team. You could be a Cowboys fan or a 49ers fan.
No.
But so why it ties into this jacket. So this particular jacket that I'm wearing, this is a design that the Eagles gave to Princess Di in the 80s. And there's a cover of People magazine where she's wearing this jacket. And there was only one of them made. It was just for her. And so Mitchell and Ness decided to re-release it last year.
Yeah.
And they made like 100 and they sold out right away. And you can go on eBay, they're like $2,000 or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
So then my wife tells me like, hey, did you see they're releasing more of those Mitchell and Ness jackets coming up? And I said, oh, what is it? She's like, I think they're releasing them now. She said, you should go online. So I went online, they're sold out. Little did I know she had already bought me one.
Oh.
And so for Valentine's Day last year, she did that. And she presented it with me. And I'm wearing it because it's like, I want it to be, I've only worn it once. This is the second time I put it on.
Good.
I put it in a case and it's going to stay there. But I thought, I want to wear this on this podcast today. I knew I was coming home for the first time in a couple of years to inspire me to finish that project, to not be afraid to tell those stories. A lot of it's pain coming up of things that I went through with my childhood.
Yeah.
And so I think that's that trauma response.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I so appreciate you sharing that. It's so vulnerable to share that, but I am so appreciative of you sharing it because you're not procrastinating writing a book, right?
It's hard.
It's hard. And you are working through the emotion of everything that it brings up. And so, like, sure, we could say you're procrastinating, but if we're getting more technical and more accurate, it's like, I'm taking the time to feel what I need to feel before I like put these stories out into the world. That's work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. And to process the relationship with your parents, like I hear you speak really fondly of them, and that's beautiful, but I can sense the pain there too. And for most of us humans in the world, there's fondness and pain with our families, right? That's very normal. But as someone who's just like learning to experience emotions, I mean, not just, but like in the last couple years, like this is hard work. I just really commend you for doing that work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Ugh. As we wrap up, I'm wondering if you have some encouraging words for people who are listening, who are like, I want to learn how to stop procrastinating, but I don't know where to start, or I'm afraid, or I just, maybe I'm just broken. Like maybe I'm the one who's like just broken and can't figure out how to do it. Like, can you encourage our listeners a little bit?
Absolutely. Because I used to look at you as aspirational. And I'm like, I want to be Kristen Carter. I want to be that. And I realized that, so for anyone out there, the work can be done.
Yes.
It's there. You can do that. I was in your chair 3 years ago.
Yes.
You, the listener, or watching on YouTube. And I've been there, and my journey's not complete. I still got a long way to go.
Same.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's okay. You can get to a better place. It might not seem like that now.
Yeah.
But you can. And just again, have that grace. Yeah. If you were walking down the street and saw someone with a broken arm, or we're on crutches, you're probably going to hold the door for that person.
Yeah.
But because we can't see what we're dealing with up here, we don't even give ourselves grace. We just think like, oh, well, now I have my ADHD diagnosis. I should be able to move
should just
forward.
be able to do it.
Yeah, right? Like, so give yourself the grace. You can get to a point and, be where you're at, where you can process these emotions better.
So good. Thank you so much for being here. It's just been such a joy. Can you tell us how people can find you? Like if somebody's listening and they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like my kind of a coach. Like how can people find you, Steev?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. So thank you. Couple ways. One, I'm on social media, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle there is Damn Healthy Dose, @Damn Healthy Dose. It's a play on ADHD.
Love.
Damn Healthy Dose. My website is damnhealthydose.com.
Love.
I don't know when this is airing, but I will be at the International ADHD
Oh, cool.
conference
Yep.
in November in Anaheim. So if
Yep.
you happen to be there, stop on by my booth. I'll be there at booth 303, I think it is. And also at Focused. Come on in. We need more voices in here.
Yes.
So, but I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone.
That's awesome. Thanks, Steev. This has been so much fun. And let's just close by saying, go birds.
All right. Thank you. Go birds.
That's great.